Well, good evening, everybody. And once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for this evening's presentation, which is about India, discovering India. We're always amazed, I have to say, how many people, how many connections, I guess, effectively we have, how many people join us for these evenings. And we've had such lovely feedback from you guys. Obviously, we're delighted that you are still interested in joining us and hearing about all of these wonderful places around the world that we operate trips to. That was funny. Helen just sort of appeared. Like you came in on a conveyor belt. Anyway,
I was trying to be surreptitious.
It didn't work at all. That was absolutely hopeless. Hey, Helen, before we have a quick chat, I better tell all the lovely people that are on board that they need to post questions in the chat, and we'd be delighted, obviously, as we always do. I know many of you pose questions in the chat. Please do ask questions. We'd be delighted to answer them at the end of the presentation. Your chat, you will find, for those of you that don't know, though I suspect you all do these days, if you're on a computer or a laptop, your chat facility is at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on a handheld device, I believe it's at the top. I never do this on a handheld device, so I don't really know, if I'm completely honest with you, but anyway, that's what I'm told. So this evening's presentation is about India, and it is being given by the lovely Helen. Helen, question for you. Do you know who is the most requested speaker in our speaker series? Which person?
I'd say Nick Garbett. Based on Madagascar and based on India, absolutely, Nick Garbett.
No, sorry, had more requests for you to do talks than anyone else.
You're joking.
so there's no pressure.
Wow. Thank you.
No pressure, obviously.
Thank you very much.
Well, don't thank me, just thank all the people that are watching. And all the people that have requested you to do talks. So that basically eliminates me from the equation. So in essence, it means that you can do all of the rest.
I'm gobsmacked. Wow.
Look, India this evening. You've been once or twice, I think, haven't you?
Yeah. So first visit was quite a long time ago. I went to Kerala and the backwaters and Mannar in the hill country in the south. Second time was to the Golden Triangle, so Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, etc. That was on the back of a Nepal walking holiday. And then in December 2018, thanks to you and the lovely Dan, I had a humdinger of a trip. So I was sent out to central India to basically suss out the differences between 6 of the tiger reserves there. So it was 40 plus lodges and 6 reserves in 13 days. Crikey, it was immense.
That was a big trip. It
was epic.
Well, look, I mean, we've been operating trips to India for a long time, haven't we? But India changes. It changes quickly. It has been changing quickly over the years. Look, nobody wants to hear me rabbiting on. Why don't I just hand straight over to you? But oh goodness, sorry. Yes, we'll chat again at the end. Very much looking forward to it, and we'll chat again at the end. You've driven me to drink, obviously, so I'm sitting here with a beer for the first time in a long time.
I'm sitting here with my water bottle given to me by the lovely Lodge Jamtara in Kent.
Very nice.
So there we go. There's the Indian connection. I would love to be drinking a Kingfisher beer, but ever the professional.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm not drinking a Kingfisher beer, but I am drinking a beer. Hey, over to you. I'll speak to you later.
Okay, all right, thank you. Right, okay, so yes, hi everybody. I am Helen Bryon. I'm part of the team here at Wildlife Worldwide, and as you are aware, I'm going to be talking to you about central India, which is just a superb part of the world. And I think really just to start with, we have to acknowledge that India is vast, and there's a great temptation to try and fit as much as you possibly can into a wildlife trip there. But we have to remind ourselves that we're talking about a subcontinent here. So whether you're traveling to the Himalayas, whether you're traveling to, you know, the hot and humid south, you can see on this satellite image, the northwest, very arid, the mountains of the Western Ghats down the west coast. There is so much diversity in India because there is so much habitat. And whistle stop trip, you know, India offers everything from snow leopards up in the Himalayas in the far northern part of the country, Ladakh, through to the northeastern part of the country, to the absolutely charismatic red panda that can be found on the Nepalese and Indian border. Continuing in a sort of clockwise direction, if you will, you've got Kaziranga over in the far eastern side of the country, and the one-horned rhino is a big draw to this particular part of the world. Coming down that east coast, you have the fishing cat. There are so many species of cat in India that we actually have dedicated trips for the small cats of the northwest and the small cats of the northeast. Coming down to the southern part of the country, this particular creature, this magnificent male melanistic leopard, has well and truly put Nagaholi National Park on the map. Nagaholi is right down in the far south of the country. And for about the last 4 years or so, there have been reliable sightings of this incredible individual. Now, he's been seen mating quite a lot. He is therefore a male in his prime, so we don't know how long he's going to stay in the area, but we have been successfully running trips there for the last couple of years. Last year, we obviously didn't for obvious reasons, but melanistic leopard, you want to be going straight down to Nagaholi National Park and just keep our fingers crossed that he sticks around for a little while longer. I mean, just look at those eyes, phenomenal. In this region as well, you've got quite a high amount of endemism in the reptiles, in frogs, in birds, but also in some of the mammals here. This is a lion-tailed macaque. It's only found in the Valparai area of southern India, and we incorporated on a few of our trips down here. Now, if we go up, sorry, there's a snake, there's two snakes, just in case anyone's a little bit squeamish about them. These are Indian rat snakes, and I actually think this is a beautiful picture. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because if you remember that satellite map, going up the western coast of the country were the Western Ghats. And if you're a herpetologist, you need to be making a trip out to this area. Now, on my visit, I was bowled over by the standard of guiding in India, and almost all the guides that I met in central India, the minute those tiger reserves in central India close for the monsoon, which I'll talk about in a little bit, they hot-foot it down here to the southwestern part of the country, to the Western Ghats, Western Ghats, just made that right up. And they actively spend 3 or 4 months looking for new species of snake, frog. I mean, crikey, this area is so rich in biodiversity. It is incredible. If you go further up that west coast, you're going to get to Sasangir, home of the Asiatic lion. Crikey, this part of the world is high on my list. And we offer a trip that incorporates, or many trips that incorporate Sasangir to go looking for these beautiful creatures. But the northwestern part of the country is also a mecca for some really rare mammals. So funnily enough, we have a trip called India's Northwest Rare Mammals. On that trip, you will be making a beeline for areas in which you can find the Indian striped hyena, the wonderful black buck with their incredible horns, the wild ass of Gujarat. This is actually a real success story. At the end of 2020, a census was done for these wild ass, and their numbers are up 37% in 4 years, which is wonderful, wonderful news. Another success story leopards. You normally associate them with Africa. This is actually also on the Northwest Rare Mammals trip. There is an area called Jawai. Now, if I could get on a plane and go there tomorrow, crikey, I would. Cave-dwelling leopards that literally just give you photo opportunities to die for. But in central India, there's another success story where leopards are concerned. Their population is up 60% in 4 years, which is wonderful, wonderful news. Coming back to central India and what I'm going to be talking about for the next 20-25 minutes or so, there's one creature that is the big draw, and justifiably so. This is the creature that brings most people to India for their first wildlife experience. And then once you're there and you come across the quality of guiding, the hospitality in the lodges, and you're essentially bowled over by just how much diversity there is in the country, it's tigers and the rest of India's wildlife that will keep you coming back time and time again. So in terms of central India, if you look in the top left-hand side of the screen here, you can see a map of India, and superimposed within that, central India. So what we do is we tend to fly you into Delhi initially. It can also be accessed via Mumbai. And once you are in the country, we suggest a night stop on arrival just to catch your breath and to avoid any misconnections, because we then fly you to a number of access points within central India, and they're signified by the red dots on the main map. You let us worry about that. We will work out which is the closest airport for you, and then we will arrange everything to get you between all of these different reserves. Now, you're going to see this map time and time again, so don't worry about trying to memorize that Pana's up in the north and Tadab's in the south and Satpura's in the west. Don't worry about that. We will annotate this map to show you exactly what we're going to be talking about. And rather than me just sitting here going through all 6 reserves that I visited, that would be a little bit dull, one after another. What I'm going to do is just really sort of talk you through what to expect from an Indian safari initially, so how it differs from Africa, for example. And then we'll get into some of our most popular itineraries, some of which are small group, some of which are tailor-made, and we'll visit the different reserves as they do. So you'll get a better sort of understanding of which reserve offers what. In terms of the wildlife, all of these tiger reserves give you the potential to look for tiger, leopard, dhole, Indian wild dog, gaur, India's version of a buffalo, I suppose, and all of the prey species, the birds, the reptiles, etc. So really just to sort of take it forward from here then, when you go on safari in India, by and large, that's going to be by jeep. There are 1 or 2 exceptions, but most safaris are going to be vehicle safaris. And this is obviously the ideal. This is what we want you to come across, the ability to follow or to just come across a big cat in its own environment and simply to observe. Now, what happens is all of the accommodation that is offered in central India will always be outside the national parks. So what you're going to do at dawn and at dusk, like in Africa, most wildlife is active on a crepuscular basis. So you go out at first thing in the morning, you go out for sunset, and you return to the lodge in between your vehicle safaris. Now, your lodge will give you a naturalist driver guide. So they will take you from the lodge to the closest park gate every morning and every afternoon. Sometimes you'll join a queue at that park gate. You'll show your passports that will be matched against your permits for entry, and off you go. Now, different reserves manage the traffic within the parks differently. For the most part, you'll find that there is a zonal system in operation. And a zonal system, the parks might be split up into 3 zones, into 8 zones, and essentially a number of permits will be allocated to each zone each day. So the zones that you're allocated are completely arbitrary. They cannot be requested in advance. So you get what you're given, and essentially you drive through those zones and you try and see as much as you possibly can at the time. So in addition to your naturalist guide, who will be driving you from the lodge and into the park, at the park gates, you will also be joined by a local park guide. So on the vehicle, you can see the 2 vehicles here. I know they're blurred, but they're fairly small compared to African safari vehicles. They're open and they've got 2 tiered seats in the back. In theory, you can fit 6 people, but it would be a squash and there certainly wouldn't be room for camera gear. We actually have a policy with our partners in India, who are superb, just to put it out there. We have a policy of no more than 4 clients per vehicle. You can request a private vehicle. There will be a cost attached to it, but you can do private safaris, or you'll just be put with 2 other people from the lodge and you'll join them for your ventures into the park. Now, once you're on safari, it's a little, well, quite different, in fact, to Africa, because there are no radios on the vehicle. Some parks don't allow mobile phones. And as a result, you can't just listen to the radio, hear what other people have found and go and join a sighting. You have to work much harder to get the result. So when you enter a park, the thing you're looking for first thing in the morning are fresh pug marks. As soon as you find them, you follow them. And there's a lot of stopping and starting because you need to turn the engine off and tune your ears into the sounds of the bush. Now, if you watch Nick Garbett talk on India a couple of weeks ago, I can remember the first time I heard him talk about India, and he very much talked about listening to the sounds of the bush and looking at the light first thing in the morning, the beautiful dappled light, and just soaking up the scenery in which you find yourself. Now, when you're looking for predators, which obviously is what most people are going to do, they're looking, you want to see a tiger, you want to see leopard, you want to be, to see the big stuff. If you come across a feeding animal, it's either blissfully unaware of any danger or there's no predator in the area. Now, the prey species are beautiful. This is a sambar. Gorgeous, gorgeous creatures. They're deer, so they shed their horns on an annual basis. And you'll also find chital or spotted deer. Again, stunning, stunning creatures. Now, chitals spook at the slightest thing. So if you hear alarm calls from chital, you can, follow them. But if they lead to nothing, fair enough. If this creature, this is a female sambar, if this creature actually makes a call, you're going to listen. They only alarm when they really feel that there is danger. Ditto with langurs. Just like you listen to monkeys and baboons in Africa, here you listen to langurs. They have different calls for different predators. So you will essentially have one call for a tiger, in which case body language, generally you'll find them all just hot-footed up to the nearest tree. If there is a leopard in the area, it's pandemonium, because obviously the leopards will go up the trees to follow them. So you're listening for those. You're watching for vultures in the sky. They might lead you to a kill, just as they would in Africa. You've also got your avian predators. So things like your Indian palm squirrels, your mongoose, they will make a hell of a racket if there is a raptor in the area. Another bird that makes a hell of a racket are the peafowl. Absolutely glorious. I just didn't expect to see them out there, and they're everywhere, trotting along the roads, running along the sides of the roads, and they're just glorious, glorious creatures. So just something, really quite different. Really, rather than just becoming fixated on the big stuff and listening to their alarm calls and looking for their pug marks, it's also really, really important to just sit and be in the moment and enjoy the smaller stuff, enjoy the personality of the langurs, the peace of just watching them when they are at peace, which is fairly rare. They're pretty, rambunctious animals. Of surrounding yourself by gore in the grasslands and just hearing them ruminating next to your vehicle, which is just wonderful. One of my favourite mornings was actually my last morning in Bandhavgarh, and it was a really misty morning and you could barely see off the side of the road, and this huge chital male just walked across in slow motion and then vanished into the mist on the other side. And shortly after that, we just sat and we watched a troop of rhesus macaque essentially just going about their morning business. The youngsters were playing, the adults were grooming, reinforcing bonds. A rival troop came past and all hell broke loose. And it's those little things that actually really stick in your mind. So just a quick note on guiding once again. I've touched on this already in terms of the fact that the guides are passionate about what they do, about writing books, about doing theses, about sort of learning as much as they possibly can. And I was blown away by their butterfly knowledge, by their tree knowledge. All of these things fit together, and it's really important that a guide covers how everything fits together, the importance of every little creature, of every little tree, and in terms of the birding in particular. I'm one of these really annoying people on a drive who will just say, what's that bird? What's that bird? What's that bird? And if you've been to Africa a number of times, there will be overlaps. I can remember driving through Ghana and thinking, that sounds like a drongo. And I said to the guide, is that a drongo? And he said, yeah, but it wasn't a fork-tailed like I was used to. It was a racket-tailed. You've got the bee-eaters. You've got parakeets, wonderfully charismatic creatures yet again, sitting in Panna one morning, just watching a male and a female popping their heads out of their nest, just checking out what was going on in the world around them against that glorious blue sky. Just wonderful. You've got the rollers, you've got woodpeckers. I've never been able to get so close to woodpeckers. The flameback woodpeckers, this was in Ghana, never been able to get so close and to see them so clearly. Beautiful, beautiful birds. The number of owls, obviously, when you're out on your drive, they're not active, but, just marveling at their camouflage as they just snooze away the day waiting for sundown. Just one last thing really on what to expect on an Indian safari. I thought that the Central Indian tiger reserves would have elephant in them. If you're looking for wild elephant, you won't find them here. You will find them in Nagaholi, the reserve down in the south that I mentioned earlier, that's on the map due to the melanistic leopard. You will also find them in places like Corbett, which is 6 hours north of Delhi, very much known as a birding park, but it is a tiger reserve as well, and there's wild elephant there. But in central India, the only elephants that you'll come across in the parks are essentially working elephants. They're used as anti-poaching. So, just bear that in mind. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth has this got to do with it? When to go? So we're going to just talk weather briefly. When it rains in India, my word, it rains. The annual monsoon you can expect really from May through to end of September, really. So what happens is from May to September, the Central Indian tiger reserves actually close, and a lot of them remain closed until mid-October. The National Park staff will still be working away, but trying to conduct vehicle-based safaris on dirt roads when there is this much rain, it's just not going to happen. So during our summer months, May through to September and into early October, you won't be able to access the central national parks. But as soon as they open, so November to April really is the time parameter that you're looking at for wildlife safaris in this region. One of the naturalists that I met at a lodge called Flame of the Forest in Kana, which was one of my favourite lodges that I stayed at, he was actually a professional wildlife photographer as well as a naturalist. And he actually said that immediately after the monsoon, so November, December, they were one of his favourite times to actually go looking for tiger in particular. He said it was blooming hard work in November because the bush is so thick after the monsoon. But if you are a photographer and it's all about the colours and the light, the contrast between the burnt orange of the tiger against the lush verdant green, it was exactly what he was after. Now that doesn't just apply to the tigers. You can also see it here with this chital stag. Again, sort of brown and the green, beautiful contrasts. But you cannot off-road like you can in private reserves in Africa. So you stick to the roads and the bush will be thick on either side of you. So for that reason, many people actually consider the prime time to go to this part of the world, January, February and March. A little bit later in the dry season, it's getting hotter, but the water levels are receding and the bush, as you can see in this picture, is thinning right back, which helps with visibility. Now, tigers like water. So if you do go in February, March, even into April, it's getting very, very warm in April, but tigers will just go and immerse themselves in a pond of water or in a riverbed, and they will literally sit and submerge themselves, so you can get some great wildlife spotting opportunities the later into the season you go. So if you just think November through to April, that's when to go. The later in the season, the bush recedes, the visibility may be getting better, and as it gets hotter, the tigers will go to water. Same again here, just to show you, that as it gets thinner, you've still got the lovely colour contrasts with the wildlife. Then one final note before we actually just start to look at the reserves themselves in a little bit more detail is that throughout Madhya Pradesh, which is where 5 of our tiger reserves that I'm going to talk to you about are located, a Wednesday afternoon, all tiger reserves close. Standard procedure in Madhya Pradesh, which is often referred to as MP, Madhya Pradesh. So it doesn't mean that you can't get out and about. Yes, it's a lovely opportunity if you're there on a Wednesday. In the afternoon, you can just relax at the lodge, by the pool, you can read a book, pick up a guidebook. But what a lot of lodges also do is use Wednesday afternoons to go out into the community. So you can hire a bike and you can cycle down to the local village, you can meet some of the local villagers, you can maybe see what they're doing in terms of community work and community projects, and that's quite important, diversifying, particularly at the moment with the fact that there's a lack of international visitors into the area. Some of the arts and crafts that are being produced are still a way of maintaining a form of income for a lot of these villages. So Wednesday afternoons are also a time that we often will organise transfers from one lodge to the next or one park to the next. Some of these transfers are usually 4, 5, 6 hours in duration. So by doing a morning safari, you can then use the afternoon when the park is closed to move on to your next tiger reserve. So let's actually start looking at some of the holidays that we can offer in this area. And the first one that we're going to look at, it's probably our most popular small group trip, and it's called the Ultimate Tiger Safari. We offer 2 departures a year, always in February and in March. And it's basically a trip that we fly you into Delhi as before. From there, we bring you down into central India, and your first point of call in terms of tiger reserves is 4 nights at Bandhavgarh. From Bandhavgarh, we then continue on to Kana for an additional 4 nights. And from Kana, we can then fly you home. So if 8 nights in central India is going to be enough for you, then that can be the end of your small group trip. But we also offer an extension down to Tadaba. And Tadaba is in a different state. It's in Maharashtra. There's very little in terms of the wildlife difference. You're going to see the same wildlife down here. But whereas MP has a Wednesday afternoon closure, Tadaba has Tuesdays. But all of these reserves, none of them are fenced. So what they all have are buffer zones surrounding the reserve itself proper. And sometimes different rules apply within the buffer zone to what is called the core reserve. So if the core is closed, you may still be able to go on drives or do activities in the buffer. And, you know, because there's no fences within the buffers, you've got just as much chance of coming across wildlife as you have within the reserve proper. But this is a nice way to do it. Bandhavgarh for 4 nights, Kana for 4 nights. And then if you wanted to go down to Tadaba as well, then you can. Now, in terms of sort of distances, how long it's going to take you, Bandhavgarh to Kana is around about a 6-hour transfer. It's longer than that to get from Kana down to Tadaba. So if you want to add it on, we can do, but all of these transfers are going to be done by road, and I'll talk a little bit more about that again briefly later on. So Bandhavgarh, Kana and Tadaba. I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to all 3 of these particular tiger reserves. But one of the things we get asked about a lot as well, what sort of accommodation do we use? What's the food like? And what's the overall experience? So our first point of call on this particular itinerary from Bandhavgarh is to stay at this lovely property, Bandhav Villas. Now, Bandhav Villas, you enter through this wonderful archway, and you can see it's sort of made of stones. And when you enter through this archway, you come into a big circular driveway in front of the communal area of the lodge. And that is dominated by a massive banyan tree. And at night, they hang lanterns from this banyan tree. And oh God, it is so romantic, absolutely lovely. Just what you need when you're traveling on a small group trip. But it's really, really lovely. And one of the first things that happens when you enter any lodge, this happened all 40 times I entered a lodge on my trip. First thing they do is they welcome you with a drink, with a cold towel, and then they ask you about dietary requirements. They're very, very aware that the international reputation of Indian food is not always the greatest. And they will ask you, do you like Indian food? And then how spicy do you like it? If you're not a fan of Indian food, and if you're worried about the spices or Delhi belly, then they will put on European fare for you. And one thing that almost all of these lodges have in common is that the chef grows their own veggies and their own herbs. So nearly all of these lodges have got extensive veggie gardens. We were literally just walking through the gardens, picking veggies out of the ground and eating them there and then. And it was dreamy. And at Bandhav Villas in particular, one of my favorite things was the food. So you know, the lodges are very hot on this. So if it's a concern for any of you thinking about traveling to India, don't let it put you off. The food is phenomenal. I usually put on weight when I come back from India, and I quite like that. But so Bandhavgarh, this is what we're here for. Not for the food, not for the lodge. It all helps, but this is what we're here for. I love this because you don't even notice the little cub coming in from the right-hand side of the photo. It's all about the greeting between mum and the other cub. So tigers obviously are a big draw to all of the reserves in this area. Bandhavgarh has a very high density of tigers. That's why we include it. You have as good a chance as any of seeing tiger here. And in fact, this is where the BBC filmed Dynasties a couple of years ago. And so, it's generally considered a great park if tigers are a big draw for you. It can be a little busy as a result. But again, our naturalist guides are very good at what they do. They will take little known roads. To give you an idea of what Bandhavgarh looks like, it's stunningly beautiful. It has a number of sort of flat top mountains, similar to mesas that you get in South America. So flat top mountains, and you actually traverse over the top of them during your safari. So you've got hairpin bends, then you're driving over granite boulders with things like Malabar pied hornbills all around you. Then you drop down the other side and you're in these beautiful flat meadows. Lots of water in Bandhavgarh, and therefore, that's where you're sort of looking for the game. So it's a really beautiful park, and I just thought it was smashing. And when I think of the parks, I think of quite sort of the meadows, but also that combination of dry deciduous forest, bamboo in many respects, lots of different habitat types, and that lends itself to lots of different wildlife as well. Following our 4 nights at Bandhavgarh, we head over to Kana. Now, Kana, highly personal this, but Kana was my favourite park. I feel like there was just a magic in the air here. It's funny, when you speak to clients and you speak to people who've been to India, everybody has very distinct opinions on the different tiger reserves, but I loved Kana. And the property that we stayed at here on this particular trip is Singanawa. Singanawa is made up of a number of these lovely little stone cottages. They don't look much from the outside, but when you go inside, they are beautifully done. They are filled to the brim with reference books, which is a nod to the quality of the guiding that you'll get here. And the chef, as a welcome gesture, puts cookies in your rooms that have been iced with what look like paw prints for tigers. It's a little thing, but I liked it. And so Kana itself, it's just, to me, I just think of the tall sal trees, driving along these tracks with huge, great big sal trees on either side. Lots of meadows again, lots of waterways, and it's also home to the very famous Kana meadows, which are up on a plateau, and the meadows, brilliant big cat territory, teeming with big herds of chital, muntjac or barking deer, but it's also home to Barasingha. Now, at one point, we were down to 60 individuals of Barasingha, and if I remember rightly, I might, oh God, now I'm doubting myself, it's either in excess of 300 or in excess of 700, I can't quite remember. But through ecotourism and through various conservation efforts, their numbers have gone right up, so much so that a small number of them have actually just been introduced to Satpura National Park, that I'll talk about in a moment, in an effort to try and get a herd going there as well. These are otherwise known as swamp deer. And it was here that, again, just little memories, but ones that really stand out. There was a youngster that had essentially a number of jackals following it. And the jackal got hold of one of the back legs of the youngster, and it did what swamp deer do. It ran into the nearest body of water, and it hung on and it hung on and it hung on, but the jackal also was holding on to its back leg. And it's just a very stark reminder that, survival of the fittest, and there's a very thin line between life and death in these parks. Now, After your 4 nights at Kana, what you are then able to do, as I mentioned before, is head on that day journey down to Tadaba, across the state line in Maharashtra. This was the first property that I visited, and they do nightly presentations as standard, so you get to learn all about what you're hoping to see the following day. It's a beautiful lodge, and it's literally across the road from the park gate at Tadaba. And at the time of my visit, so December 2018, so just over 2 years ago, Tadaba was the place to see tiger. It was the up and coming reserve. And I was unsuccessful, but I only had, 2 drives there, but it was a beautiful reserve, very bamboo, full of bamboo, and bamboo, when it has its shoots low to the ground, it just meant that at the time of my visit, the visibility, wasn't great. The bush hadn't thinned out that much. But then again, a colleague of mine was there a week after me, and she said she had the best tiger sightings of her life ever. So you just never can tell. And there are some flat meadows, and it's a very beautiful, beautiful reserve. I really enjoyed it, and I would thoroughly recommend, doing the extension to include Tadaba, so that you can visit all 3 reserves. Lots of waterways here, so these are lesser whistling ducks, and it's just very, very scenic, really quite lovely. So that was Ultimate Tiger. So Ultimate Tiger was 4 nights at Bandhavgarh, 4 nights at Kana, and then coming right down to the southern area of central India to Tadaba for an extension if you want it. On a tailor-made basis, there are so many combinations that you can do across India, but also in central India. And one of our most popular Indian tailor-made trip is Tiger Tiger. And Tiger Tiger basically links Pench, which was another, I loved Pench, beautiful, where I saw my first tiger. So of course it's going to hold very special memories. Kana, where I saw my second tiger, it's going to hold very special memories. So you start in Pench, you head across to Kana, and then you go up to Bandhavgarh. And I would say these are sort of the big 3, if you like. They are easily linked with half-day transfers between them, as you can see there. Pench to Kana, 5 hours. Kana up to Bandhavgarh, 6. And the nice thing about this as well, actually, I'm just going to go back a slide. If you can see Bandhavgarh there, which is sort of towards the top of the screen, there is a red dot just to, say, 9 o'clock from it, and that's Katni. Very close to Katni is a railway station at a place called Umaria. And there are direct trains, overnight sleeper trains, that link that with Agra and also with Delhi. And a lot of people, when they visit India, they want to incorporate a train journey. It's one of those sort of iconic rites of passage for, clients who wish to go to India. So you can incorporate the Taj Mahal very, very easily. In fact, you can do that with any of our trips, because the Taj Mahal is only a 6-hour drive from Delhi. So if we fly you in and out of Delhi initially, we can very easily arrange a car and driver who will take you across. Even if you've just got 1 extra night to do it, you can then go for a sunset visit, a sunrise visit the next day, go back to Delhi and fly out. But if you've got a couple of days, not only can you incorporate Agra, you can also incorporate Jaipur, which is a spectacularly beautiful city with forts and Palace of the Winds. There's all sorts of wonderful bits and bobs that you can add on from Delhi. So this is the winner. So you've got 3 tiger reserves, and you've got the Taj Mahal, you've got your iconic overnight sleeper train. And the beauty of a tailor-made trip is that you also have the choice in where you stay and how long you stay for. The trip ideas on our website give you an idea of what to consider, but obviously that's completely changeable. This is actually Sarayat Toria in Panna National Park, but a beautiful, authentic sort of cottage stay, versus in Pench area, for example, you can stay at the fabulous Jamtara. there we go, of my water bottle fame, where you've got these incredible Rajasthani tents. They've even got a star bed. So as is becoming very popular in Africa, you spend a night under the stars. I mean, that would be incredible. And if you're incorporating Rajasthan, or, you know, nowhere in the world does heritage hotels like India. You know, this is up in the north by a place called Bharatpur, which is a very important birding site. And you know, the heritage hotels are simply phenomenal. They're absolutely brilliant. So with the tailor-made stuff, you can have authentic, you can have, you know, luxury, you can basically do it how you want to do it. And that's the beauty of a tailor-made trip, or just adding a tailor-made extension to a group as well. I digress. Another question that we get asked a lot: if I'm doing a tailor-made itinerary, what sort of vehicle takes me from one reserve to the next? This one. So a Toyota Innova, you will have your own private driver who will take you from one point to the next. My guy was Prem. He was an absolute legend. His car was his castle. It was spotless. Every morning I got into it, every time I got into it, it had been cleaned. There was a basket of fruit and nuts and crisps and biscuits, fresh water. You know, that they tell you where the loo stops are going to be, because they want to make sure that you're only stopping at the cleanest, and you know, and everything is planned like clockwork. And this is where our ground handlers come in. They are simply phenomenal. You're in good hands. You're in really, really good hands. So anyway, let's move on to the next trip. Right, so our next trip is another tailor-made trip idea that I'm going to talk to you about, and it's walking in the steps of sloth bears. Now, I want to see Baloo, and for that reason, there are a couple of parks that traditionally have always been very renowned for sloth bear. The first one is Satpura, which is in the western part of central India here. And from Satpura, we recommend moving on to Pench, just because we really do feel that having two reserves under your belts is just good in terms of your wildlife sightings. Now, 5 to 6 hours to link the two, and our walking in the steps of sloth bears trip starts in Satpura. And Satpura also is home to a hill station called Pashmari, which is actually a biosphere reserve. And the Satpura Mountains are spectacularly beautiful. I thought this park was glorious. And many of you will know Chris, who one of my colleagues, Ozzy, as we all call him. This is Ozzy's favourite Central Indian park by a country mile. So we love it. Satpura is not only incredibly beautiful, its mascot is the Malabar giant squirrel. We had 2 sightings of these. They are wonderful, and yes, they are rather giant. So they're careering through the the river, you know, cliff, what am I on about? The treetops above you. And it was also traditionally the place to go to try and see sloth bear. So Satpura was always associated with sloth bears. Now, in recent years, Satpura's sloth bear population has actually, as cute as they look, with this very endearing habit of carrying their young on their back, don't be fooled by their cuteness, because these guys will take on a tiger and they will win. And if you look at the claws on this guy, now these are termite eaters and ant eaters and berry eaters, but if you look at the claws on this creature, they really know how to defend themselves. And although they can take on tigers and win, they don't always win. And in recent years, the tiger population in Satpura has increased. So it's now really an all-rounder park. You've got as much chance of seeing a sloth bear here as you have a leopard, as you have a tiger. We actually got out of our vehicle to go and sit on some rocks and eat breakfast. When we walked back to the vehicle, there were leopard tracks everywhere. So we were very, very close. And After Satpura, we move you on to Pench, and Pench was the inspiration for Kipling's The Jungle Book, and I think that's just inspired many of us who have now, you know, gone and visited India's central parks as a result. In Pench, this is one of the properties that we use, and it's called the Pench Tree Lodge or Tree House. It is glorious. This was the first thing that I asked to go and visit. I just wanted to go and see the tree houses at Pench. They have cottages as well if you're not sure about going up and down the steps. And it is a beautiful property set in masses of grounds. You can go on walks, you can go biking. It's just glorious. And at the time of my visit, Pench was very much the place to go for dogs. So Indian wild dog or dhole, and also for leopard. It's here that that leopard population amongst the Madhya Pradesh parks has just shot up. So no guarantees, but incorporate a couple of different parks, and we would very much hope that you'll have a wildlife extravaganza. Finally, there's one park that I haven't mentioned, and that is Panna, which is right up in the north. And we can include Panna for you on any trip. It's one of the lesser visited parks because it's slightly off the beaten track. I very much see that as a bonus. So Tigers in Luxury is the trip that we incorporated on. And Panna you can see right up in the northern part of MP or Madhya Pradesh there. Now, I got really quite excited about Panna because from Panna, it's easily incorporated with Bandhavgarh, but in addition to that, the closest airport just happens to be in a city that is home to a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Khajuraho, and you can easily just spend an afternoon from your lodge in Panna coming and walking around these incredible monuments, or you can have a night stop there like I did on my way back from Panna. And the flight from Khajuraho also just happens to touch down in Varanasi. Oh, look at that. I've always wanted to go to Varanasi. So I managed to wangle a night in Varanasi as well. Now, Varanasi is bonkers, but brilliantly bonkers. I stayed right on the Ganges here. So literally my hotel room looked out over the Ganges. You just walk along the ghats that you can see here. And they have the most incredible sunset arti ceremony. And then the following morning, you can again watch the priests and the sadhus going about their business. And it's just an assault to the senses. To get down to the ghats, you can't drive to the riverbank. You actually have to walk through. Porters will carry your luggage if you're staying right on the river. And you literally just need one night here and it will just blow you away. Absolutely marvelous. And Panna itself, Panna is a beautiful park. It was, I thought, possibly one of the most scenic of my trip. And it very much reminded me of Africa. So there are, again, just the grassland areas, and you go up a bamboo forest, and then at the top plateau was just grasses rustling in the wind. We had sambar barking like you wouldn't believe. We knew that there were predators close, but they just stayed that little bit out of reach. It doesn't matter. It just makes you want to go back again. But the influence of Africa, I really noticed here. I think it was just the grasslands that just went on and on and on. Beautiful scenic points with waterfalls. This area is flooded in the monsoon time. And you've also got massive river systems going through Panna. So crocodiles, wading birds, all sorts going on here, and just very scenic. And you can go out and you can go out on canoes and just, you know, photograph the wading birds, the kingfishers, the thick-knees, all sorts. And really, I've kind of, just looking at the time, slightly gone over. Sorry. I need to wrap up. So I'm going to try and wrap up by really talking just in general. So you can see Bandhavgarh, Kanha and Pench slap bang in the centre there on this map of some of the national parks of India. So I've only really touched the surface, and I've just realised I should have mentioned about Satpura. Satpura, which is where we offer the sloth bear trip in combination with Pench, that also stands out for the reason that you don't just do vehicle safaris there. You can also do canoe safaris, motorboat safaris. Motorboat, you're not blasting along the reservoir, you're going very, very slowly. You can do night drives there, you can do walking safaris there, and you can do mobile safaris there. So Satpura is quite different, and I just completely forgot to mention it, which is all good. But so to wrap this all up, really, you know, I started this by saying you've got the one-horn rhino, you've got snow leopards, you've got Asiatic lion, you've got Nagahole down in the south. There is so much here, and there is so much that we can put together for you, and I just urge you to go, really. That's really all I can say. It's marvelous. There we are. Right, Mr. Breen, any questions?
Couldn't find my unmute button. Have I got any questions? Crikey, I don't know where to start, Helen. Yes, gosh, what a wonderful journey around India. Thank you very, very much for that. That was absolutely...
Whistle stop, crikey.
Whistle stop, I know. I was going to ask you about, excuse me looking away from the camera all the time, but I've got so many questions that have come in, I don't know where to start. I was going to ask you about activities in Satpura, but you nailed that one right at the end.
Better late than never.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I am going to begin with a bit of sort of journey related stuff. So traveling from park to park, you showed that rather nice, the nice sort of vehicle that you're traveling from place to place. I'm guessing they're probably air conditioned.
Yeah.
And might,
yes.
a few people have asked similar questions. You know, might you combine, if you were going to a number of different places, might you combine some transfers by vehicle and some transfers by train? Is that sort of thing possible?
Yes, absolutely. We can do, you know, sort of shorter train journeys. I only really mentioned it with regards to linking Bandhavgarh with Agra or with Delhi. Yeah. There are a few, yes, where you can do a shorter, just an hour or two on a train, just to, you know, sort of tick off the experience, I suppose. But most of them will be by road, most of the transfers. Okay,
and if somebody wanted to go by train, I mean, are the trains relatively clean? Are they safe? Is it, how would a train transfer work, for example?
There are certain classes that we wouldn't recommend, so we would go for first class. You know, essentially, yes, there are lots of different classes on board, and we would go for the better ones. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And I think I'm right in saying that we would probably have someone that would actually make sure you are safely on the train.
Yeah.
You know, that would sort of post you onto the train as if you were a letter.
Absolutely.
Letterbox, and then
pick you up at the other side.
Pick you up at the other end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They really just, that one of the things that I was so impressed with on my trip were just, you know, the logistics were just handled so well. What actually happens is our ground operator, they actually have a WhatsApp group for every client booked, and that WhatsApp group consists of every property they're going to, every naturalist involved on the itinerary, every driver involved on the itinerary, and they literally communicate with each other every step of the way. So they'll say, Helen has just left Taddabush, expect her in 4 hours time. She likes Kingfisher beer, that would be the ideal welcome drink. Wow. She doesn't like, you know, she loves Indian food, make it spicy, that's fine. She saw a tiger. When, you know, so then when I get to the next reserve, they have a, you know, they know roughly what I've seen and therefore what I might want to see. the whole thing is like clockwork. They are phenomenal.
I mean, I entirely agree. I haven't been to India
Yeah.
for a few years. In fact, I was due to be going out on the 13th of March last year, but it all
You
went.
were.
I have to entirely agree with what you're saying there. They are the slickest people that
Very.
we work with probably
Yeah.
anywhere in the world.
And I think that's important because a lot of people are concerned, you know,
About
India's
India.
reputation and food particularly. That's why I sort of laboured that point. But no, honestly, you're in very, very good hands.
Yeah. No, I agree. So look, on continuing sort of with if you like, sort of the structural side of things. Is it possible on a tailor-made trip, for example, to weave some cultural stuff in? You mentioned the Taj Mahal. Is it possible to weave foodie stuff in? I mean,
Yeah.
there can be no more wonderful food in the world than Indian food, especially that eaten in India. And we often get people saying, I want to do a wildlife trip, but I want to go and see the Taj Mahal. I mean, crikey, that's amazing. And I want to eat some great Indian food. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. We can do bolt-ons on, pretty much whatever you want. But that's a good point, actually, in terms of the food. Somewhere like, if you're staying at Satpura, I stayed at a lodge there called Forsyth. Forsyth will do you a cooking school during your stay.
Oh.
And there are a couple of lodges that would offer that for you, and they actively encourage you to go out with the chef into those incredible veggie gardens and into the herb gardens, and they're nice also, just to sit there and enjoy the birds and the bugs and everything.
Yeah.
So it's another aspect that just adds to your overall experience and enjoyment.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
okay, I entirely agree with that, and that's wonderful. Might be worth you mentioned birds and bird watching then just a second ago.
Yeah.
Can you tell me? Can you maybe tell us a bit more about that? I mean, is India a good place to go for bird watching?
Oh, absolutely. It's got like 10% of the world's species. So, and yeah, I mean, the birding is absolutely amazing. And because there's so much, well, there's biodiversity because there are so many habitat types. And the Himalayas in particular, we've got a trip called Birds and Big Tigers, and that basically takes you from Delhi up to Corbett National Park, which is north of Delhi, and on a migration route. And we do that in October, November, which is when the birds are migrating. Then we bring you down through some of the cultural bits, and you end up in central India for the tigers bit at the end and the other wildlife. So birds and tigers, that's a great trip. Really, really good trip.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And if somebody, again, a couple of questions about vehicles and private vehicles. If somebody wanted to have a private vehicle on one of the safaris, is that possible?
Absolutely. Yeah, because we only do 4 people maximum anyway. So we can always request private vehicles. There is a supplement that comes with it, because obviously then, you're determining your own time when but yeah, we can absolutely organise that. The one reserve where it's harder to organise private vehicle would be in Tadaba, simply because the Maharashtrian authorities they often reduce the amount of permits. But then again, they're introducing more buffer areas, so you safari in different areas. But at the time that I was there, Tadaba would be slightly harder because they limit the number of vehicles permitted at any one time. But all the other reserves, it's all subject to availability, but yes, we can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's brilliant. And what about the roads in the national parks? Are they all right? I imagine they're probably a bit like the roads in the African national parks. And
yeah.
Also, what about the roads transferring from place to place to place? Are they okay? Are they
Yeah.
is it rather bumpy? And what's the story there?
In the parks, I thought they were very good. They're all dirt tracks. I quite like. I think I mentioned with Bandhavgarh, I love the fact that you're going hairpin, bends up onto the flat tabletop mountains, and then you're driving over boulders and then down the other side. I mean, it's just exciting. It's great. And some of the, all of these reserves seem to have a central meadow plateau, at Panna going up, you know, these sheer steep slopes, but you're in low range, you're in four-wheel drive, it's fine. I overall found the roads very, very good, a lot better than some of the ones in Africa actually. And linking the parks, there were masses of roadworks which can have an impact on how long it takes to get from one reserve to the other. But that was over 2 years ago. If that's now finished, well, then you're going to have lovely, you know, tarmac roads in good condition. So no issues really.
Okay, well that's good. So it may be worth, again, one or two questions about this that have come through on chat. Could you just reiterate again for us the best time to go and see tigers? I mean, you know, we are of course, we want to get people out there to see tigers. We know that there's other magnificent wildlife out there, but tigers are a key species. So, but just perhaps, I know you did say, you know, during the course of your presentation, but perhaps just reiterate that for us. That would be helpful. Yeah.
So the season is November through to April. I would say January, February, March, April would be your best months. February and March, because for many people, April will simply be too hot. So it gets hotter and drier the later into the season you go, just like in Africa and in South America. But you are talking hot by the time you get to April, seriously hot. So for many people, I would say, yeah, February, March, perfect.
Okay, that's brilliant. And again, another couple. I tell you what, we've had a couple of questions about whether it's possible to do full day trips in any of the national parks. There's kind of might do in Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, for example. Is that possible in India?
It is. Good question. So yes, there are certain parts, Bandhavgarh, Kana, and Pench, if I remember rightly. I can check this, but yes, you can do full day permits. They used to be incredibly cost prohibitive, but I believe that they've come down, and they're now more flexible. So it means that by buying a full day permit, normally what happens is you go in on your morning safari, you have breakfast in the parks on your morning safari. So you get a packed brekkie from your lodge and you go to a designated point where you're allowed to get in and out of the vehicle, and then you have your brekkie, you resume, go back to the lodge for lunch, and then go back in again in the afternoon. Now, at these certain parks, you can do a full day, and you can have up to 3 people, I believe, in each vehicle, and it just means that sometimes then those zones that I was talking about, where you're, you know, you have to go into one particular zone and you're only allocated that there, you can then basically free for all across all zones. So if you pass other vehicles and they've been driving in a different zone and they say, you know, we saw this or a kill or something, well, it just gives you free rein to head over there. So yeah, it's a good option for photographers in particular as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, and actually then, so you've actually raised another very good point there. Are there any dedicated photographic trips?
Yes. Nick Garbutt, so, you know, forever popular, justifiably so. So yes, we do trips with Nick Garbutt, snow leopard trips, Central India trips. We've also got Chris Weston, another professional photographer that we do a trip with. So yes, there are dedicated photographic trips, and they will have even, you know, we will put fewer people in each vehicle on that one, spend more time in an area, so that, you know, you can really try and get the best out of it. Absolutely.
And one or two people, I'll just ask a couple more questions, but for those people that are still on board and have put other questions on chat, we will get back to you in the course of the next day or two. Sorry, we're not going to be able to get through all of these questions, but one or two people have said, what are the chances of going to India and not seeing tiger?
To be honest, realistic. I was very much warned before my trip by a number of clients, don't go expecting to see everything on your first trip. And don't go expecting to see tiger. So I was incredibly lucky. I was only on my second drive, third drive. and I got a tiger sighting of a magnificent female called Collawolly, and she's known as the super mum of Pench. She's her daughter has recently given birth to 5 cubs. They were spotted in December. Now 3 to 4 cubs is the norm, but Collawolly is a bit of a phenomenal tigress, and she was my first tiger. So I literally was beside myself. I couldn't quite believe it. And then for about the next 6 drives, didn't see tiger, and then got to Kana, and on my second drive in Kana, got a female with 2 cubs. So I would say that's actually quite realistic to go and not see tiger on your first visit. But if you go in March, April, if you're willing to deal with the heat, and you've got every chance. So it's like all of these things, you never can tell, can you? It's like going to Africa, sometimes you don't see lion and you're just like, what? But it's unusual, but it happens.
No, absolutely. Okay, so look, it is now 8:45.
Crikey, sorry.
I'm going to ask you, final question I'm going to ask you comes from Susan. How do I win the lottery so that I can do all these wonderful trips?
When you know the answer, let me know, please.
You've got to play the lottery first, I don't do it.
It's so funny, when you said there was one last question you were going to ask me, my finger went straight to my keyboard, because I'm like, you want me to put the last slide on?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, that'd be great.
There we are.
So look, Helen, thank you so much. That was wonderful, as usual. Thank you very much to everybody who is still on board, and there are many of you. Thank you. Thanks for all your questions. We'll come back to you if we haven't been able to get to your questions this evening. Next presentation, which is on Thursday, is from the lovely Sarah Malcolm about Sri Lanka. And I would urge you to jump on board for that one if you're not already signed up for it. Helen, thanks ever so much. Thanks, guys, for spending the evening with us as usual. We'll see you soon. Cheerio.